So tonight we are going to talk about the 7 essential coaching questions. And I am so glad that you're here to join me for this because these questions are amazing. So for those of you who are here, who are new or who don't know me, I'm Allison Peterson, and my job, I'm a K through 12 independent school instructional coach. And this is my 7th year coaching. And we did a book study on The Coaching Habit by Michael Bungay Stanier here in the group, and it was amazing. And so one of the things that we did with that was we did 4 weeks of live meetings, and that was awesome. And so what I wanted to do was come back on here and chat through that book with everybody to just go over the 7 questions that Michael Bungay Stanier includes in his book, because they're so powerful, they're so useful, they're transformational to your coaching. So if we could go through those together for just a minute, I think that you'll get some insight out of it. So we're going to do a quick recap of those 7 questions. I'm going to focus in on the 7 questions because what you can actually do is you can go to the units tab in the Facebook group, just click on units, and you'll see a unit called the Coaching Habit Book Study. And all of the recordings from the 4 times that we met and talked about the book are all there and available for you. So you can actually go back and watch those. So this is just a quick recap of the 7 questions. I'm going to share my screen. So these 7 questions, these 7 essential coaching questions, come from The Coaching Habit by Michael Bungay Stanier. So he wrote this book several years ago, actually, but he came out with The Advice Trap in early 2020, which is his kind of companion book. It's kind of like the deeper dive into the work that was in The Coaching Habit. But The Coaching Habit is where he introduces these 7 questions. And it's kind of amazing because you would think that you would need more than 7 questions to really get coaching going. But he really explains how these 7 questions can really just do so much to transform your coaching conversations. One of the other things that he talks about in the book is that his goal in teaching you these 7 questions is that you can coach in 10 minutes or less. Now, his audience for this book is not instructional coaches. He's talking to business managers who are really trying to kind of like manage their team, manage their people. So what we can take from that is that, of course, we're going to have longer conversations with teachers. Of course, we want to have longer conversations with teachers. But if you're a new coach and you're just trying to get started and you don't even know what a coaching cycle really is yet, and you're just trying to build relationships, then you just need to coach in every conversation that you have. So every time you interact with a teacher, you can actually be coaching when you're using these 7 questions. And it's subtle, and they won't feel like they're being coached all of a sudden. But this approach, this kind of casual coaching approach that Michael Bungay Stanier brings, is so powerful because it's the coaching in 10 minutes or less, which means you can coach them when you catch them in the workroom. You can coach them as you walk out to lunch. You can coach them when you see them in the hallway. And I think you'll find that type of coaching, if you can do conversational coaching and catch them, you can actually turn those coaching opportunities into longer, more intensive instructional coaching opportunities. So it's kind of like get your foot in the door. How can you get started? Start with this idea of coaching in 10 minutes or less. It's really powerful the way that Michael Bungay Stanier explains it. All right, so let's get to these 7 questions. The 7 questions start with question number 1. It's called the Kickstart Question, according to Michael Bungay Stanier, and it's what's on your mind. And he says to use it really in any situation where someone is going to come up to you and you want to really try and start coaching them in this conversation. You want to get them maybe out of small talk and into a little bit of a deeper conversation. If we're talking about being able to coach people in 10 minutes or less, then you will, you'll have to kind of get started quickly. So what he wants you to do is use the Kickstart question to start directing the conversation. What's on your mind? So what's on your mind? When to use it with teachers? Use it when a teacher comes to you with a question. Use it when a teacher comes to you and asks for help. And so what this question does is it kind of narrows the focus a little bit so that they are actually going to start getting closer to the real problem when they walk up to you. If they walk up to you, and I've had them do this to me all the time, so, oh my gosh, I have a question for you. Or, oh, I was thinking about you. I was going to ask you, da, 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 da. You can just start with, well, what's on your mind? Tell me what's on your mind. Or if they show up in your office and they're kind of looking at you and they're waiting and they're like, are you busy? Can I meet with you? You're like, what's on your mind? Because what that does to me in this environment is it opens the door. I am interested to hear what you want to tell me. Go. And then it usually leads to a really good conversation. So the Kickstart question is a great one to use anytime the teacher is coming into you, they are bringing you a problem, they are asking you for help, or they are coming to you with a question. Or the other trick you can do is if this teacher and you have had some small talk interaction, you guys have had good conversations, but you can't seem to get past going ahead and like getting to like a coaching conversation with her, you can use this question to really think about how you can get her to kind of get past small talk and go into like, well, what's on your mind? And what you can do with this question is I have some variations on that PDF. If you go grab it, I have some variations. So you can say something like, what's on your mind with your students, or what's on your mind with your classroom, and what's been on your mind lately. So that's a great one to kind of go get everything started, get it moving, break through, and actually start coaching in 10 minutes or less, according to Michael Bungay Stanier. But I can tell you, it works. So the next one that he recommends is his AWE question. AWE is what he abbreviates it as, and what else? So he says that this is the best coaching question in the world. And the reason that it's the best coaching question in the world, in his thought and his mindset, is that it helps you to stop giving advice and listen a little longer. Another piece of Michael Bungay Stanier's kind of philosophy is that if you will just wait a little longer before you jump into advice giving, you're going to be doing better coaching, right? So if you don't jump in and start giving answers right away, and you can hold back even just a few questions, you're going to be a better coach. That's his philosophy. And it's really genius the way he talks about it. If you haven't yet, if you go into those units that I was telling you about, there's an interview that he does with Jim Knight. And it's a video interview that he did kind of in the spring. And it's amazing. And he kind of gives an example about how he uses this. And that's great. There's also a podcast that I found from a couple years ago that he uses all the questions in order. And you like listen to him and the cadence that he has with dropping these questions. And it's really, really helpful. So that can be something that you can use as a resource to kind of figure out how to get these questions flowing. But and what else can be just an opportunity for you to get them to say more. You want more. Now, you don't necessarily need more of the background information because you're not trying to solve the problem, but you probably need them to have more things out on the table so that they have more solutions to think about, right? So he says you can use things like, well, what else could you do? Or tell me, and what else is on your mind? Or, and what else could we do as a possible solution? So trying to use this intro prompt to extend the thoughts that they're having and have them tell you a few more things before you start giving answers to the problem. Another reason that he says you can't start giving answers to the problem is because whatever they just brought to you is not the real problem. He says that 99.9% of the time, whatever they start this conversation with is not the real problem. So you need to be careful not to walk into solving a problem that's the wrong problem. So what he recommends is ask, and what else, to see if there's more happening, to see if you can start to identify what the real problem is. And so the things that you can do with this is when to use it with teachers. Use it when there's a pause in the conversation. Use it when you're trying to stop yourself from giving advice. and use it when you want the teacher to think about other solutions to consider. So those are some ways that you can use this question, and when they're kind of coming to you, how you can use the question there. So question number 3, I used this one recently and I'm going to tell you about it. So what's the real challenge here for you is question number 3. He calls this the focus question, because what he wants you to do with it is help the person that you're coaching come to a place where they know what the real problem is. They've identified what that real problem is, and they know where they're going to focus on the problem. Often in these conversations, a lot of things come out on the table, right? I mean, well, I've got this flex issue, and I've got this curriculum issue, and I've got this technology issue, and I don't even know where to do this thing. They tell you 10 things that they have that are problems, and they're bringing to you scattered thoughts. So when you are coaching them and they're telling you about these things and you're just casually walking to lunch together, you can say, well, what do you feel like the real challenge is here for you? And it's so casual, but I promise you they are going to come back with an answer and be like, well, I guess the real challenge is, and then you'll start narrowing down the problem to identify what it really is. So I had this happen just the other day. I went in to meet with a teacher. She had asked me for a meeting. And so I was excited to meet with her. I hadn't had a chance to do that yet this year. And she starts talking about the data scores for the MAP scores, and how are they compiled, and how are they, just tell me more. She wants to know about the MAP scores. And I'm thinking to myself, this can't be the real problem. I could just tell right away that there's got to be something else. Why would she be asking me about the MAP scores? She obviously has like a student she needs to work on or some kind of issue. So I kind of asked, well, tell me more. Tell me what you want to do with the MAP data. Tell me what students you want to be working on. And I finally got her to the place where she was telling me what the real problem was. And I had to say to her, okay, so is this the real problem that you're trying to solve? And so it's like a variation of the same question, like, what's the real challenge here for you? Or is this the real problem that you're trying to solve? Okay, let's solve it together. And that creates clarity for them, and it creates clarity for you. So asking those questions can really do a lot to make sure that you are truly being useful in this conversation with this teacher. So, what's the real challenge here for you? You can use this one. Let's look at these here. Use this one when the teacher is not clearly explaining the problem or identifying the problem. Maybe she is giving you lots of problems, or you're not clear on what the problem is. When a teacher gives you a lot of problems and you need to narrow it down and focus on one problem that they need to work on right now. And you can also use it when a teacher is venting. So we know we have plenty of opportunities for teachers to come to us and just vent and vent and vent, and they're not problem solving. And so one way to bring them back into, kind of call them into a coaching conversation, is to say, well, what's the real challenge here for you? They have to come over their venting and complaining to answer that question. And it's a hard question. And so sometimes you might need to make sure you've built the relationship before you're ready to ask it. But think about when you do have a teacher who continues to come to you in this place and she's venting and she just is complaining and complaining, seeing if you can narrow down her problem with this question. And then you can use the next couple questions and we'll figure out how to help her. So the next questions help you with that. So, what do you want is the next question. So this question is the one that really is going to get to the heart of the issue. As Michael Bungay Stanier says, this is when the adult conversation starts happening. We really need to talk about what is it that you want to achieve here, and how can we make what you want happen? And if you don't ask them this question, you're going to step into assuming that you know what's best for them. So it kind of goes back to that advice giving, right? You don't want to be giving a lot of advice, because you want to make sure that you're actually giving useful advice, something that's going to help them. And if you don't really know what they want to happen, then you're not going to be able to give the right advice. Now, you can't always promise that what they want is something that you're going to be able to deliver. And so he does talk about that in the book, that you don't have to say yes to them. Just because you ask them what they want doesn't mean you have to give them what they want. But what it means is that you have gotten a clearer picture of how they would ideally like to solve this problem. So you can use this question when a teacher seems stuck and she doesn't really know what to do next. You can say, well, what do you think you want to do next? When you want to give a teacher ownership around something, I used this one in an email recently to kind of say, like, what do you want to do next on this project, so that she could own the next step. When a teacher brainstorms too many options, you can help her cull it back with, well, what do you want to work on? What do you want to do next? What do you think is going to be most helpful for you right now? What do you want to achieve here? You can kind of get some variation to this question. When a teacher asks you to solve a problem, is another great place. When they're asking you to solve the problem, you can put it back in their court and you can ask them, well, what do you want to do? And that helps you to not solve their problem, helps you to stop from solving their problem, and it helps them to have to come up with a solution. Sometimes they'll kick it back to you, but you have good questions in your arsenal, so you can try and get them to continue to think about the problem themselves. So after you ask, what do you want? Then you can ask what he calls the lazy question. How can I help? So this one I have just come to use in any avenue where someone is addressing me. And I know that seems a little strange, but I stopped kind of saying, like, what's up? Or how are you? Like, sometimes, like, I had a teacher kind of like lean into me at a table today at lunch, and instead of saying, like, hey, how you doing? And just leaving it open-ended, I was like, hey, how can I help? Because I could tell that he needed something. This is the one where when they walk up to you with an open mouth, like they're going to say something and they don't know what they're going to say, or they can't get it out, I always say, hey, how can I help? And that, it's very casual, but it's become intuitive, and it always opens the door. When they come to you with that face where they like want to ask you a question, but they not really sure how to word it, or they don't want to bother you. Like, I don't know why they think that I'm being bothered by them. They are my job, but they don't want to bother me. I am often needing to help them know that I'm available to help them. And so by asking this question, well, how can I help? I'm not really asking them to give me a list of things that I need to do. I'm asking them to I'm telling them to say, like, share with me what's on your mind so I can help. It doesn't mean I'm going to do it for them, right? But it opens the door. I'm available to help you. So when someone sends me a text, I will really often reply with, how can I help? Or someone says, are you available? How can I help? Like, I'm always going to this question to make sure that I am offering help very quickly, because this is, it's the hand being given out, like the picture there. Let me help you. If you're willing to ask for it, I will help you. And sometimes that means I have to go get somebody else, get some permission, go seek something out. I'm not always able to give them immediate help, but I know what they feel like they need help with. And that's when they feel heard. If they feel like someone heard them and knows what they need help with, it makes the world of difference. So definitely use this question when you're trying to be lazy, which is, again, this idea of you trying not to solve the problem for them. You want them to say out loud how they want the problem solved. And even if it's not the route you're going to go, getting them to say it out loud can really kind of bring out that information that you need to help coach them better. When you aren't sure what would help. So sometimes you're not sure what would be the best help for them. Or when you want to offer support, but you're not sure what the right fit is. One thing that we really, really need to remember as coaches, and this is something I had to do today when I was coaching a teacher, is not everybody thinks the same. And it's very natural for you as a coach to think that your thought process and your logic is the same as somebody else's, and that what makes sense to you will make sense to them. That is not true. And it's taken me a long time, and some days I still miss it, and I forget that, oh, not everybody thinks the way I do. It's the idea of realizing that if you assume that people think the way you do, and you assume that the solution that makes sense to you makes sense to them, then you're making a mistake, because you have to ask, how can I help? To find out what really will help them, what seems helpful to them, and allow the direction they want to go to be the direction, if you can, if they're not like going off into, saying they want to do something that's against what the school wants to do, then let them do the thing that probably doesn't make sense to you, but it makes sense to them, and that's fine. So those kind of things can be simple when you ask this question. You'll find that. So this question is the strategic question that he calls this. And it's really, he kind of phrases it, if you're saying yes to this, what are you saying no to, is kind of the way he phrases it. And I see this one as being like a little bit of a question where you're trying to help them realize that they've made a commitment to a change. And you, remember, are trying to help make change happen as a coach. So you are all about the fact that they have decided to make a commitment to a change. It might be that they're going to write the agenda on the board tomorrow before class starts, but that's okay. It's a commitment to a change moving forward, and it's progress. So what you want to do with this question is help them, one, see that they've made a commitment to a change, and then two, figure out what they need to maybe like remove from this picture to make sure they actually make that commitment to that change. So when a teacher needs to focus on her commitment, you can use this question, or when things or processes need to be removed so that you can make room for a new idea. Often this question will help them to think about the processes or the things that they're doing that needs to just kind of come out. Well, if I'm going to do it, like a good example would be like using something virtual or digital that wasn't before, right? Well, if I'm going to do this virtually and I'm going to put this on Google Classroom or whichever learning and management system you have, then I don't need to do the worksheet anymore, right? So like the worksheet is off my plate. The task of putting it into the LMS is now on my plate. So what am I saying yes to is a really interesting question. You can kind of tweak it a little, like to say like, well, what needs to change to make this happen? What boundaries do you need to set to make this change? Sometimes those are boundaries at home. Sometimes those are boundaries with a partner teacher. Sometimes those are boundaries with a student problem that they're having. Like, what boundaries do you need to set, or what expectations do you need to clarify? What can you remove so that you can make room for this is another way to kind of say this question. And like, so tell me again, what are we agreeing to here? What do you want to do first? So those are some ways that you can kind of shape this question, but it's about the strategic idea that this teacher has just embraced taking on a new thing. And you're going to help her say like, okay, I'm actually going to do this. So that means I better not do this and this. Or if I'm actually going to do this, then I also need to do this, this, and this. So helping her think about what this change really means is what that question does. So this one is probably not as casual. You probably want to use that in a deeper conversation, but there could be an opportunity where a teacher is telling you, well, I'm going to do this thing tomorrow. And you can say, well, is there, what needs to happen so that you can make that change happen? And that could be more of a casual question. So there are 7, and this is number 7. Y'all, this is probably, it's hard to pick a favorite of these 7, but this one is a game changer. So if you only use one question of the 7 essential questions from Michael Bungay Stanier's book, The Coaching Habit, you need to use this one. And the thing is, you're probably already using it, but what you need to do is use it super intentionally and every opportunity you get. And then just sit back and like watch the magic happen, because this question will actually create visible thinking right in front of you. You can see it. You know, those visible thinking routines that they talk about? This question makes those happen. So the question is, what's most useful to you? And you really want to use this as a culminating question at the end of a conversation. And he says you use it when a conversation is coming to a close. When you end a professional development session is a great time to use this question, or any time that you want to prompt reflection. And this question really can be well placed in a lot of different formats. You don't have to always use it verbally. You can often use it as a follow-up question. It can be like sent in a Google form after a professional development, or it could be sent in an email after a meeting with a teacher to ask her, well, what was most useful to you in our time together? But what it does is really powerful, because it prompts the teacher to really consider all the things that she has just talked to you about and what was most useful to her. And so I think one thing that you're going to find with this question is that the answer is often going to surprise you. And you think that what you talked about was useful, this thing over here was useful, but the teacher really took away this other thing. And again, it goes back to that idea that no two brains are alike. Two brains don't think the same way. And what makes sense to you doesn't always make sense to them or click with them the same way. So one thing you're really doing with this question is getting to know this teacher better. Like, you just spent an hour with her, and you feel like you had a good breakthrough in there, but you need to figure out what was her breakthrough, because what you thought was the breakthrough might not be her breakthrough. And so you take a minute and you ask, well, what was most useful to you in this, in our time together? And at first you're going to think that that's an awkward question to ask. Just go with it. Okay. Go with it. And then give her the good 7 to 10 seconds that she needs to think about the answer to it. So don't interrupt her, and let her answer it. And then you will be like, oh my goodness, that was really helpful, because now I understand her better. I understand what impacted her, how it impacted her, and why. Because I thought it was this, because that's what made sense to me. But really for her, it was this. And that was the thing that made the most sense to her. So it's really a way to understand your teacher better and what works for her. And if you don't take a minute to do this reflection, then you might miss something kind of subtle that she was taking away that you didn't even know. Another great way to use this question is having them write it. So I used this today. I did that all day with this teacher. We did the learning walks in the morning, and then in the afternoon we did like content planning and instructional planning, and it was this really great, rich day with so many ideas. And this is a brand new teacher, like first year teacher. And so I bet I knew that there had been too many ideas. I had brought a lot. There was another teacher who was with us who had brought a lot. There were so many ideas. And I was a little worried that she was going to get lost in them, because the way that her personality is, it didn't seem like she was going to be able to kind of keep all those ideas in her head. So at the end of it, I had prepped an agenda, and at the bottom of the agenda, I had written like 4 boxes, blank boxes for takeaways. And so before we wrapped up our day, I said, well, I think what we should just do is just take a couple of minutes to write down what was most useful to you. What are your big takeaways from this day together? What really, what do you think you want to take into tomorrow? Like, I'm trying to get it as practical as possible. What are you going to use tomorrow? And she really embraced that and sat down, and I wrote some things that I felt were useful to me, and she wrote some things that were useful to her. And then she told me the 4 things that were the most useful to her. And I was like, that's it. It was perfect. It was the things that I was hoping she would get that she got. And then she wrote them down, and then there they were, ready and waiting for her to try and use. Another thing that's super important here is that you as the coach have that information for the follow-up, right? This is why this is a great one to use for a after PD Google form. Because if they tell you this was the most useful thing, and you write that down or have access to it, then next time you see them, this conversation continues. Oh my goodness, how did that thing go that you used, right? Like, how did that new strategy go? Did you try it, right? Because you said it was the thing you wanted to try. Did you get a chance to try it yet? It's your foot in the door for the next conversation. If you take a minute to like wrap up with this, with what was most useful to you, and get that information from them, then you know what you're going to talk to them about next time. So these 7 questions can be used in like any situation, and they can be used kind of casually to see if you can kind of coach people in 10 minutes or less. Now, really, it's all about getting your foot in the door so that you can have that longer meeting with that teacher or that weekly meeting with that teacher that turns into a coaching cycle. But as a brand new coach, just trying to get going with this thing called coaching, everyone told you have to build relationships. Well, it's hard to do that, but you can try to get some small talk going. And as the small talk goes along, ask what's on your mind and see if you can get your way into a coaching conversation just by using these amazing 7 questions. So